Well, we're not off to the best start because I've already lost 3 miles of range just loading up the trailer and pulling out of my neighborhood, which, I mean, maybe a quarter of a mile. Hopefully that's not how it is for the rest of this trip, but this trailer, like I said, it's aluminum, less than 1,500 pounds. This truck shouldn't even feel it. I mean, the acceleration is ridiculous. And that's the only time I'm going to do that because I want to save the range, but also if I strap something down and floor it like that, it will most definitely fly off. The torque is just unreal, but we're going to conserve it because, yeah, now it's 195 and we haven't got a mile yet. Well, I am not very optimistic here because we have already used 20 miles of range to go 10 miles, not even halfway to the Car Wizards, with an empty, very light aluminum trailer, and the range is dropping that quickly. I gotta do 2 trips, not just 1, 2 trips, but I will say this is a very, very comfortable, nice riding truck, and not having any engine noise, anything at all, to where you can almost hear the normal environment around you. A little bit of tire noise and wind noise, but otherwise just completely silent. Of course, the sound of rain too, which may be hurting things some. But I don't think this truck is going to get anywhere close to getting the job done today. I mean, look at the mileage. We're at 167. It's dropping like a stone with an empty trailer. Well, I made it to Wizards with 132 miles remaining, so we are going almost double the range with an empty trailer. But now we're gonna load it up. So let's go inside, check on the Car Wizard, and see what my payload's gonna be. Some cool stuff, actually. Wizard!
Hey, what's going on?
I am EV towing.
EV towing?
The Lightning pickup truck is towing back the 2 Fords over there.
How's it doing so far?
It's not good. It's used over 70 miles to go here, which is about 35.
So it's used twice the power.
With an empty trailer.
With an empty trailer.
Aluminum trailer.
Aluminum trailer.
It shouldn't even feel it. It's like 1,400 pounds.
That's the weird thing about the EVs, I think, with towing, is you lose so much range, more than a gas or diesel.
Right.
GM, Ford, and Hyundai have had to do massive recalls, so the problem is costly. CNBC explores how automakers and firefighters are going to deal with EV's fire problem. Over the years, lithium-ion batteries have seen significant improvements in energy density, and while this has enabled more powerful batteries, it made them more vulnerable.
You had to do lots of things to optimize it. One of them was to reduce the space between the 2 electrodes. But as you get closer and closer to each other, the chances of a short increases.
A key ingredient in batteries is liquid organic electrolyte, but it is also one of the most flammable. Liquid
electrolyte, like gasoline, is a flammable liquid. And it could get into what's called a thermal runaway situation, where it just started, sort of boiling the liquid, and it results in a fire.
Today's batteries are very safe, and for large ones, such as those in EVs, cells are meticulously controlled through a battery management system.
It has to maintain the right operating temperature for the battery. Then within that operating temperature range, the other aspect of it is how fast does it charge or discharge.
But there are rare instances where defects or damage cause issues.
We don't know the exact frequency of failure for lithium-ion cells. We assume it's somewhere between 1 in 10 million and 1 in 40 million.
Battery electric vehicle fires can happen due to defects in the actual battery cells or in the pack architecture. The battery pack design matters, and so does the quality of manufacturing.
And when they're fully charged, that's when they're the most dangerous.
Think of it as a fuel tank. If you have a fuel tank in a standard combustion engine and it's completely full and you develop a fire, you have a lot of fuel load, you're gonna have a long burning fire. It's the exact same concept with batteries.
The battery problem is unique to electric vehicles, but non-crash fire risk is not unique to electric vehicles.
Car fires are unfortunately nothing new. Internal combustion engine vehicles continue to have issues. Vehicle fires accounted for 16% of the 1.3 million fires reported to U.S. Fire Department.
Headlines about electric vehicle fires are becoming more common worldwide.
His car was towed to a shop where it then burst into flames.
And with the number of EVs only increasing on Australia's roads, the Firefighters Union is concerned.
There's no greater likelihood of an electric vehicle fire than a combustion engine car fire. But when they happen, The risks are huge.
The biggest cause of such fires is so-called thermal runaway from the batteries.
And that is where that heat builds up and the current flowing in the cells causes the ones adjacent to it to start going into a chain reaction.
Newer models do have safeguards built in, but the Firefighters Union says a major concern is the location of charging stations, often in garages and underground or multi-storey car parks. And when it comes to putting out a blaze, the union says a typical combustion engine car fire takes between 1,100 and 1,400 litres of water or foam to fully extinguish. While a fire in an electric vehicle, which involves the batteries burning at a much higher temperature, can take up to 30,000 litres of water to put out completely.
So then there's the question of where do you get the water? And what do you do with that water once it's contaminated? And how do you get that water into something like a multi-storey car park?
We just take tanker appliances rather than pumpers to provide us with the larger volume of water that we need.
There's also an emerging risk to first responders.
Even with the very best protective clothing and firefighters being covered from head to toe, they run the risk of cobalt poisoning. That can be career-ending.
The ACT government and Fire and Rescue have just spent millions of dollars upgrading to the latest standard of personal protective equipment, which includes a vapour barrier.
Small steps towards future-proofing are already being taken.
Being rated not to only do combustible fuels and combustible solids and liquids, but this has been designed to put out lithium battery fires.
Yes, we're getting on with it, but I would say that it's nowhere near comprehensive enough.
My next guest was forced to ditch his $115,000 Ford EV truck while on a road trip with his family. He says now electric vehicles are the biggest scam of modern times, his words. Dalbir Bala with us. First of all, Dalbir, was your basic problem the system for charging on the highway? Is that what went wrong?
Yes, thanks for having me, guys. And charging was one of the biggest challenge on the road.
Well, what happened? What happened?
Like when I get into my road trip, first stop was the Fargo, and I was under impression that charging would be cheaper than gas, but my first shock was that it was way more expensive than gas. Another was it was advertised on a fast charge level 3. The truck will be charged within an hour. It took over 2 hours to charge the truck.
Okay.
That was the first shock.
Well, did you have to ditch the truck?
We have to I have to tow it to the dealership when we get into Albertsville, Minnesota. That was our second stop, where we found 2 faulty chargers and we were not able to charge our truck. And that was late evening. We were already only 13, 14 hours into the trip. And we had a week-long trip, and we don't want any more frustration with it. So I towed it to a dealership in Elk River. And we took a rental to complete our trip. So I was already spending that much money. So with that, it's okay, let's try something new. And guess what?
Not happy.
So we can't use it for any needs for what is pickup it's made for.
Okay, well, Dalbir, I've got to leave it there, but I'll leave it with you being rather unhappy with your $115,000 EV. Thanks for being with us. Appreciate it. Thanks for the story.
Thanks for having me.
A Waymo electric vehicle catching fire in a warehouse this morning. Now, the response by fire crews was massive for this single car fire.
So officials tell us that the reality is we will face more and more of these as we see more and more electric vehicles, and these fires are extremely hard to get out. Steve Nielsen live near 3rd Street and Buckeye in Phoenix with more. Steve.
Yeah, this started a little bit before 9 a.m. this morning. 2nd Street and Buckeye here. There's a warehouse back here on the left. That's where Phoenix Fire tells us that Waymo takes a lot of their electric vehicles, their driverless cars, they bring them into that warehouse, they unload the GPS data, the ride data from the day, they put it in there. For some reason, one of those cars caught fire. We still don't know why yet. Thankfully, Phoenix Fire, though, tells us that the sprinklers went off. That was key in order to prevent this from spreading to more fires. That would have been quite the scene if you had more electric vehicles catching fire here. Thankfully, contained to just one of those electric vehicles. The staff, the employees here, they were all able to get out while the sprinklers were trying to drench that car. Putting out one of these is really challenging. That's why the response was so massive. We had Phoenix Fire here, but we also had Tempe Fire here for this hazmat response. Even the Phoenix Streets Department, they showed up as well. And the reason is simply, it's tricky to put out one of these fires.
These cells, in about a tenth of a second, can heat up to 1,200 degrees. This is why it makes it so difficult to extinguish these fires. Phoenix Fire Department is taking a proactive approach.
Okay, so you see back live here at the scene, you see this white dumpster right here that we're getting shots of? That's where the car is right now. It's inside of that dumpster. Phoenix Fire, they brought us up really close just a few minutes ago to try to get a good look at what they were doing, because they said they've only done this a couple of times so far. They said less than a handful. So what they did is they filled that dumpster up with sand. They soaked the sand. Then they put the car on top of the sand that was wet. Then they dumped more sand on top of it. And they're going to keep it inside of that dumpster for a while. They said it could be more than 3 weeks for that car to stop smoldering inside.
With huge names like Tesla and Lucid coming out with the best in battery, range, and luxury, the growth of the EV is clear to see. But that doesn't mean there aren't significant challenges in the industry. From high maintenance fees and range anxiety to potential security issues, these are some of the biggest issues EVs face today. Too high-tech? There can be such a thing as too much technology. Although EVs aren't the only cars that can be hacked, they are more vulnerable to attacks. The problem is EVs are increasingly high-tech, which leaves more opportunities for hackers. As more electric cars are connected to the internet, they get easier and easier to discover and attack. And it's not just a data breach or getting your car stolen you need to worry about. We're talking about tons of metal here, which can be steered remotely and potentially cause massive destruction to public property. And also, injure or kill people. And this isn't a far-fetched idea. It was shown to be possible when a Chinese company hacked a Tesla Model S in 2016. Well, Tesla has fixed that problem now. But for how long? The continuous clash between the hackers and manufacturers means the risk of being hacked will always be there. Maintenance. Let's keep costs aside for a minute. How many mechanics in your area deal with electric cars? Although EVs generally require less maintenance, if your EV has been caught in an accident, you'll probably need to visit a workshop, and it's very likely you won't be able to tow your car to your neighborhood garage. Well, if you live in a place where everything comes right to your doorstep, like Dubai, that's not such a problem. But then there's the matter of exorbitant fees. EVs require less maintenance because they have fewer moving parts. If a gas-powered car has 2,000, EVs will have about 200. But less mechanical parts doesn't mean less problems. EVs have complex electrical components like power steering motors and high-voltage relay banks, not to mention the giant battery packs sitting below your feet. The battery pack is the most important part of the vehicle, and it's more expensive than the motor itself. The state of the battery determines everything about your car. If you keep it out when it's too hot or too cold, it can get damaged. If you charge it too much, the battery can die. An EV battery also has a lower temperature operation range of 59 to 113 degrees Fahrenheit, as opposed to an internal combustion engine which ranges from minus 30 to 122 degrees Fahrenheit.
This is a new BYD Han, which is a fully electric mid-size luxury sedan from the Chinese automaker BYD. You can't buy this car in America right now, and you won't be able to in the future either, which is a bit of a shame because we're missing out on some truly amazing quirks and features.
So you're interested in Chinese EVs. Perhaps you've seen the flashy adverts, all the new brands coming out of China, all the advanced technology and development that they seem to possess. Perhaps you've seen some big-name reviewers looking at the latest BYD models, or Neo, or whatever the case may be, fawning over the features. Well, this is a video that will tell you that it's a bunch of BS. So China is ahead of the game when it comes to EVs. In many ways. One of those ways is that China is ahead of the game when it comes to EVs catching on fire and spontaneously combusting. And there are reasons for this. Quality control's kind of lax. Shortcuts are taken. But let's talk about the good before we get into the bad, because we're going to be looking at a lot of clips here of Chinese EVs catching on fire, doing dangerous things, and, well, by the end of this, you probably realize that there's still a very long way to go before a Chinese EV can be trusted at all. Even the best and biggest brands like this BYD burning to the ground behind me here. But before we get into all the explosive action, a word from our sponsor. So back to their latest prototype here, catching fire. I mean, come on, guys. This is the newest and greatest and latest thing coming out of BYD, and they can't even stop that catching fire. There's definitely an issue here when it comes to quality control and safety. Take a look. You're looking at a train fire, a high-speed rail fire. You haven't heard about that, have you? All you ever hear about trains in China is how amazing they are and how the infrastructure is second to none and incredible. This is a field of over 10,000 Neta V Chinese EV cars that are rotting away.
600多台啊，21年的，都是50公里以内啊，上牌新车。
And this man has just exclaimed that these BYD cars, all 2021 models, have less than 31 miles on them. Just like that field of 10,000 cars, they all have license plates on them, they're all fully registered, and they've been put away to rot. Yes, all of these cars have been left to rot. Why on earth is China throwing away entire fields of electric cars? By now, we've all heard that China's EV sales are outpacing the rest of the world. You'll see the headlines that say, China is now the leader in EV sales, and Tesla's got to watch out, and all this other nonsense. Well, guess what? It's true, the numbers are true. But what you're not taking into consideration is that China is the land of shortcuts and facades. And all of these cars that you're seeing in this field, well, they're counted in those numbers. Let me explain to you what's going on. You see the Neta Vs and the BYDs and the bigger brands that you see huge amounts of them just parked out to rot. Well, you see, that's because they need the numbers. In order to get subsidies from the government, in order to put out the sales figures that they've sold more than Tesla and that they're leading in EV production and EV sales, they need to have these fake sales. So BYD themselves will register them and put them on the market and then claim that they've been sold. And then, of course, they've got all those excess cars and they just stick them in a field and...
You can make history tomorrow.
But there's a bigger problem. There are even more car graveyards. And that has to do with this stupid investment scheme. Let me explain. In China, very often you get these fly-by-night investment schemes. Someone comes up with a good idea like bicycle sharing, for instance. And guess what? People jump on the bandwagon. They raise a bunch of investment capital. They start a company. We saw it go absolutely...
Now with an urgent alert in the aftermath of Hurricane Ian in Florida, some electric vehicles have been bursting into flames. Our chief national correspondent Matt Gutman has more on some of the hurricane-damaged vehicles. Good morning, Matt.
Hey, good morning, Robin. So this is a typical lot where they'd store cars that have been totaled by flood damage. You can see how closely parked all those vehicles are. And this is a field where they have to store EVs so they don't burst into flames and burn anything else down. And right now in Florida, officials are sounding the alarm and they're asking the federal government for guidance.
In Hurricane Ian's aftermath, electric vehicles bursting into flames spontaneously after being damaged in floodwaters. Car batteries catching fire, prompting an urgent new warning from the state.
Is the theory that when salt water interacts with these EV batteries, they turn into something of a time bomb?
Well, we just can assume that that's contributing to it because all these are storm damaged vehicles that were flooded.
It's a real concern among firefighters, those fires proving very difficult to put out.
So how much water would you put on a typical gas-powered car?
Sometimes we just take a tank of water on the engine, around 750 to 1,000 gallons.
How much on something
These,
like this?
we're doing 8,000 plus gallons of water, just constant flow, trying to cool them down and stop the batteries.
So like 10 to 12 times the amount of water is required to put a car out like this?
Easily.
An EV?
Correct.
And they can reignite. Tim Baker towed this Tesla to his lot after firefighters put it out.
I went back in my office, got a drink, sat down on the couch, and one of my employees yelled, "Hey, there's a fire."
Baker had to push the car out into the street.
Another eventful day.
And you can see the car still on skids, pumping smoke, sputtering into flames. They had to plunk it in the drainage ditch.
There are an increasing number of tow truck drivers and companies who are just refusing to tow these vehicles.
Yeah, pretty much so. I
Why
mean,
is
they're
that?
very dangerous cars to tow. They have a potential to catch fire at pretty much any time.
And storing flooded EVs is increasingly a problem.
This field has been specifically designated for electric vehicles that have been flooded out by Hurricane Ian. Every single one of them has to be spaced 50 feet apart in case they spontaneously burst into flames.
I had the first generation Prius in 2001. It looked like a Tylenol gel cap. I was always handing my keys to valets who were driving a better car than me. I had the first Tesla in 2010, and honestly, both these cars sucked. But both times I said to myself, okay, I'll take one for the team because I have a platform, so I'll do the right thing, and then everybody will follow. Nobody followed. In 2021, 80% of new vehicles weren't electric, weren't even hybrid. They weren't even cars. They were SUVs and trucks. That's what people want. In 1973, the share of global electricity generated by coal was 38%. You know what it was 46 years later in 2019, after all the talk and all the trying? 37%. You know what percentage of plastic gets recycled? 5%. Those blue bins that are everywhere, they're not full of bottles, they're full of shit.
Let's hope it doesn't blow up. The smoke is clear as day.
As we're looking at testing this for bug out applications, can already see some of the issues. One, it's freezing cold. I mean, I'm in the middle of Wyoming, about to be in a snowstorm, and the battery is at 62%, and it's 9 in the morning. So let's see where we're at in a few hours. All right, yeah, so here's the problem, and I knew this was gonna happen because my kids have Power Wheels, and when they drive Power Wheels in the snow and the cold, the battery gets affected. I gained 11 miles of range, or 6% of battery life in 10 hours and 34 minutes. That's a problem.
How much electricity does the United States demand each year?
I don't know that number off the top of my head.
Okay, it's 4 terawatts annually. So the Secretary of Energy didn't know it. The EPA doesn't know it. FERC probably doesn't know it. Who else doesn't know it in this country? And we're mandating electric vehicles. You guys have no idea how much demand is going to be there. Where is that electricity going to come from?
It come from a diverse grid.
It's 110 degrees in my hometown today. The wind is not blowing, the sun is shining, and after 4 hours of darkness, there will be no batteries on this planet that can produce a reliable source of baseload, dispatchable power. We have no plan for this.
This is so crazy to see.
This is the bottom of the supply chain of your iPhone, of your Tesla, of your Samsung. I mean, I'm just naming those companies.
Right.
It's all of them, right? All of them. We're not just picking on them. And here's what you need to know, Joe, about this video. I was the first outsider to get into this mine. And that's why it's just a really short video that I was able to take. This is an industrial cobalt mine where there's not supposed to be one artisanal miner. Now, that's the term used for people who are just digging by hand as opposed to tractors and excavators. There's not supposed to be one here. That's what the story is told at the top of the chain. This mine, and I can name it, it's called Shabara. There's not supposed to be one artisanal miner here, according to the consumer-facing tech companies and EV companies buying this cobalt. Lo and behold, I walk into this place, and this is what I see. There's more than 15,000 human beings crammed into that pit.
Just so we're clear on the scale of the issue, each electric vehicle battery for a heavy-duty truck weighs 8,000 pounds, and you need at least 2 of them. So we're talking the weight of, 4 or 5 cars. And my friends and peers in the industry nationwide who have tried to make efforts to put in, say, hey, I'm going to convert a dozen forklifts to electric, or I want to tee up a facility for 30 electric trucks. There's no power. The utilities come back, the cities come back and say, is this some kind of joke? One friend tried to put in Illinois a facility, tee it up for 30 trucks electrification. The city came back and said, this is some kind of joke. You're asking for more draw than the entire city requires. And just to give you an idea, 30, 50 trucks, that's like a 5-6 megawatt application. The factory that makes the trucks is a 2 megawatt factory.